September 12th, 1944. Fuel depot near Verdun, France. Captain Thomas Mitchell of the 702nd Tank Battalion watches his maintenance officer mark another Sherman as non-operational. Not from battle damage, not from mechanical failure, from empty fuel tanks. The battalion has 53 Shermans on paper. Only 31 can move. The other 22 sit immobilized, waiting for fuel trucks that should have arrived yesterday. Mitchell calculates in his head. Each tank consumes 150 gallons daily during active operations. That's 7,950 gallons for a full-strength battalion. He needs 32 trucks just to supply one day's fuel. The ammunition allocation adds another 12 trucks. Spare parts require 6 more. The mathematics of modern armoured warfare extends far beyond the tactical engagement between tanks. Behind every Sherman that fires its 75mm gun at a German position stands an invisible army of trucks, depots, mechanics, and supply officers whose efficiency determines whether that tank advances or sits immobilized. The Sherman tank, officially designated the M4 medium tank, measured 19 feet 4 inches long, 8 feet 7 inches wide, and weighed 66,800 pounds in its most common configuration. The Continental R975 C4 radial engine, a 9-cylinder air-cooled aircraft engine adapted for armoured warfare, produced 400 horsepower at 2,400 revolutions per minute. This power plant consumed fuel at rates that shocked American logistics planners accustomed to supporting infantry divisions. During road marches at steady cruising speed, the Sherman achieved approximately 1.25 miles per gallon on paved roads. Cross-country travel reduced this to 0.6 miles per gallon. Under combat conditions, with frequent acceleration, deceleration, turret traverse operations, and extended idling periods, fuel consumption reached catastrophic levels of 0.33 miles per gallon, or roughly 3 gallons per mile. Army Quartermaster records from October 1944 documented actual consumption rates from units in France. The 4th Armoured Division reported average daily fuel consumption of 9,500 gallons for its 53 operational tanks during mobile operations. This equaled 179 gallons per tank daily, not including the battalion's half-tracks, jeeps, and support vehicles. A full-strength armoured division with 3 tank battalions consumed approximately 30,000 gallons daily just for its tanks under combat conditions. The entire division, including all wheeled vehicles, support units, and administrative transport, required 85,000 gallons daily during sustained operations. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for 1st Army, recorded on October 3, 1944, his growing concern about fuel mathematics. We are operating 12 armoured divisions and 40 infantry divisions on a front extending 400 miles. Daily fuel requirement approaches 800,000 gallons. We currently receive 1,200,000 gallons daily from all sources: pipelines, tanker trucks, and railheads. This provides adequate margin during static operations, but leaves no reserve for simultaneous offensives. Every gallon of fuel consumed by tanks is a gallon that could have powered supply trucks, reconnaissance vehicles, or artillery tractors. The competition for fuel creates strategic choices invisible to frontline commanders, but decisive in campaign outcomes. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, universally known as the Deuce and a Half, formed the backbone of American military logistics during World War II. This 6-wheel drive vehicle measured 20 feet 10 inches long, 7 feet 4 inches wide, and weighed 13,370 pounds empty. The GMC 270 cubic inch inline-6 engine produced 91.5 horsepower at 2,750 revolutions per minute, generating peak torque of 216 pound-feet at 1,400 revolutions per minute. The engine featured overhead valves, a 6.5-to-1 compression ratio, and a Carter model WWII 539S single-barrel carburetor. Cooling system capacity was 26 quarts using a 17-inch 4-blade fan driven by a V-belt from the crankshaft pulley. The truck's cargo bed could carry 5,000 pounds on roads, though combat operations frequently exceeded this by 40%. Actual field loading often reached 7,000 pounds when tactical necessity demanded maximum cargo delivery. The chassis featured a 164-inch wheelbase with leaf spring suspension on all 6 wheels. The Timken 23,000-pound capacity front axle and 2 Timken 32,000-pound capacity rear axles provided exceptional off-road capability. Power delivery utilized a 5-speed manual transmission with a 2-speed transfer case enabling high and low-range operation in both 2-wheel and 6-wheel drive configurations. Fuel capacity was 40 gallons split between 2 20-gallon tanks mounted on either side of the frame, providing approximately 320 miles range at the standard cruising speed of 45 miles per hour. In practice, heavily loaded trucks operating in combat conditions achieved 6 to 8 miles per gallon, reducing practical range to 240 miles before refueling became mandatory. General Motors produced 562,750 of these vehicles between 1941 and 1945 at plants in Pontiac, Michigan and Baltimore, Maryland, with additional production from Studebaker and REO contributing to total production exceeding 812,000 units across all manufacturers. Peak production reached 8,000 trucks monthly by mid-1943 at the Pontiac facility alone. Each truck cost the United States Army $2,457 in 1944 dollars, approximately $42,000 in 1944 dollars, 2025 purchasing power. The simplicity of design enabled rapid production and field maintenance that German logistics officers found incomprehensible. The engine shared components with civilian GMC trucks, using the same cylinder head castings, connecting rods, and crankshaft designs. Mechanics trained on civilian vehicles could service military versions with minimal additional instruction because tool requirements and maintenance procedures remained identical. Spare parts inventoried by the thousands fit multiple vehicle types, with interchangeability extending across manufacturers. A Studebaker-produced engine could replace a GMC engine without modification, and transmissions, axles, and suspension components were completely interchangeable across the entire production run. This standardization proved decisive in sustaining high-tempo operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. The production philosophy behind the Deuce and a half-reflected American industrial thinking that prioritized maintainability over initial quality. German military vehicles emphasized precision manufacturing with tight tolerances and high-quality materials. American vehicles emphasized loose tolerances that accommodated field repairs using improvised methods and low-skilled labor. A German truck mechanic required 18 months of training before achieving qualification for independent repair work. An American truck mechanic received 6 weeks of training and learned advanced repairs through on-the-job experience. This reflected confidence that adequate spare parts and replacement vehicles would always be available, making perfect repairs less important than fast repairs. German logistics assumed scarce parts requiring careful husbanding. American logistics assumed abundant parts, enabling rapid vehicle cycling through maintenance facilities. Technical Sergeant Howard Bennett, a maintenance supervisor with the 502 Heavy Shop Company in France, explained the difference in a December 1944 report. Germans repair vehicles to make them last forever because they can't get replacements. We repair vehicles to make them last until the next depot, because we've got warehouses full of spare trucks. We replaced 340 trucks in November alone through normal attrition. Germans would consider that a catastrophic loss rate. We consider it acceptable overhead cost for maintaining operational tempo. A specialized variant, the GMC CKW 353 fuel tanker, carried 750 gallons of gasoline or diesel in a cylindrical steel tank mounted on the standard Deuce and a half chassis. The tank, manufactured by D.A. Stewart Company of Chicago, measured 168 inches long and 48 inches in diameter, fabricated from 10-gauge steel with internal baffles to prevent fuel surge during transport. The tank featured a power takeoff-driven pump capable of delivering 50 gallons per minute through a 2-inch diameter hose with a 25-foot reach. Complete fuel transfer to a Sherman tank required approximately 12 minutes, including hose connection, pumping, and disconnection procedures. These tankers became the critical link between fixed fuel dumps and mobile armoured units. Each tanker could refill 5 Sherman tanks before requiring its own resupply. Army doctrine specified that fuel tankers would operate on a continuous resupply cycle, with half the allocated tankers always either loading at fuel dumps or delivering to combat units, while the other half travelled between locations. This required precise coordination that frequently broke down under combat conditions. Army doctrine allocated 1 tanker permanently to each tank company, with an additional 4 tankers held at battalion headquarters and 6 more at division level. A tank battalion required 8 dedicated fuel tankers operating continuously to maintain operations without interruption, assuming ideal conditions with no vehicle breakdowns, no enemy interdiction, and perfect road conditions. Reality never approached these assumptions. During the breakout from Normandy in August 1944, the 4th Armoured Division operated with 15 fuel tankers, double the doctrinal allocation, and still reported fuel shortages limiting offensive operations. Colonel Bruce Clark, commanding Combat Command A of the division, recorded on August 14th that fuel supply had become his primary operational constraint, superseding enemy action, terrain, or mechanical reliability. "We can defeat German forces in any engagement, but we can't engage them if our tanks sit immobilized waiting for fuel. I have requested an additional 10 tankers be allocated to the division, knowing they probably won't arrive because every division is making identical requests." The port operations required to supply fuel tankers revealed logistics complexity extending far beyond frontline vehicle operations. Cherbourg Port, captured by American forces on June 27, 1944, became the primary fuel delivery point for operations in France. Engineers reconstructed port facilities systematically destroyed by German forces during their retreat. By August 1944, the port discharged 13,000 tons of cargo daily, including 2,400,000 gallons of fuel. Tanker ships arriving from refineries in Texas and Louisiana pumped fuel directly into shore storage tanks through temporary pipelines constructed by Army engineers. From shore storage, fuel flowed through distribution systems to filling stations where tanker trucks loaded before departing for forward areas. The 3,900 1st Quartermaster Gasoline Supply Company, operating Cherbourg's fuel terminal, processed 48,000 gallons hourly through 12 loading bays, operating 24 hours daily. Each loading cycle required 18 minutes. Truck arrival and positioning, hose connection, 750-gallon fuel transfer at 42 gallons per minute, hose disconnection and stowage, paperwork completion and departure. The company processed 640 tanker loads daily, equivalent to 480,000 gallons, requiring perfect operations with 0 delays. Actual throughput averaged 420,000 gallons daily due to inevitable delays from vehicle mechanical failures, personnel errors, and equipment maintenance. Major Thomas Whitfield, commanding the Gasoline Supply Company, maintained detailed records showing the human cost of this industrial operation. Personnel strength: 187 men operating in 3 shifts. Average working hours per man per week: 84. Casualties from industrial accidents this month: 4, including 1 fatality when a fuel pump failed causing vapor explosion. Lost time accidents: 14. Vehicle accidents damaging tankers: 23. The fuel keeps flowing only because men work beyond exhaustion repeatedly. The mathematics of tank supply created cascading demands throughout the logistics chain that amplified with distance from supply ports. Each Sherman required 150 gallons daily during active combat operations. This fuel travelled from tanker ships at French ports to fixed storage dumps, then to forward fuel points, and finally to individual tanks via tanker trucks. At each transfer point, fuel was measured, recorded, and redistributed. The system leaked persistently. Records from the Normandy campaign show approximately 8% of all fuel delivered to ports failed to reach frontline units. Spillage during transfer, vehicle accidents, enemy action, and simple theft accumulated to staggering volumes. During September 1944, American forces in France received 32.4 million gallons of fuel at Atlantic ports. Only 29.8 million gallons reached core-level distribution points. The missing 2.6 million gallons represented waste that would have powered an armoured division for 30 days. German intelligence officers analysing captured American logistics documents expressed disbelief at these wastage rates. Oberst Karl Wagner, an experienced supply officer serving with Army Group B, reported in October 1944 that the Americans lose more fuel to spillage and waste than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't inefficiency, it's abundance so overwhelming that efficiency becomes unnecessary. They can afford to waste more than we can produce. Ammunition supply created even more complex logistics challenges than fuel. The Sherman tank's primary armament, the 75mm M3 gun, fired several ammunition types, each with distinct supply requirements. High explosive shells weighing 14.6 pounds each were used against infantry and unarmoured targets. Armour-piercing shells weighing 15 pounds each engaged enemy tanks. Smoke shells weighing 15.4 pounds provided screening. White phosphorus shells weighing 14.7 pounds created incendiary effects. Standard load for a Sherman was 90 rounds of 75mm ammunition stored in racks throughout the fighting compartment and hull. Crews typically carried 60% armour-piercing and 40% high explosive in anticipation of tank versus tank engagements. Combat experience modified these ratios rapidly. After the hedgerow fighting in Normandy, units requested 60% high explosive for engaging German infantry positions in bocage terrain. During the pursuit across France, ratios shifted back toward armour-piercing as German armour became more common. Flexibility in ammunition supply required enormous stockpiles of each type at forward depots, the .30 caliber Browning M1919. A 4 machine gun, mounted coaxially with the main gun and in the bow position, fired from 250 round ammunition belts. Each Sherman carried approximately 6,000 rounds of 30 caliber ammunition in metal cans. During infantry support operations, consumption reached 2,000 rounds daily per tank. The .50 caliber Browning M2 heavy machine gun, mounted on the turret for anti-aircraft defense, fired from 110 round ammunition belts. Standard load was 600 rounds, though combat units often doubled this. Resupply operations for a tank battalion required careful calculation and precise loading. A single ammunition truck carried either 720 rounds of 75mm, representing 8 complete tank loads, or 48,000 rounds of .30 caliber, representing 8 tank loads, or 4,800 rounds of .50 caliber, representing 8 tank loads. Mixed loads were possible, but complicated loading and unloading procedures. Army doctrine specified that each tank battalion required dedicated ammunition trucks based on expected daily consumption. During sustained operations, battalions fired an average of 30 rounds of 75mm per tank daily, consuming 1/3 of standard load. This required continuous resupply to maintain combat capability. Technical Sergeant Robert Hayes of the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armoured Division, described the ammunition supply challenge in his after-action report from November 1944. We're fighting in urban terrain around Metz. Each engagement consumes 40 to 50 rounds of 75mm plus thousands of machine gun rounds per tank. Standard doctrine says we should receive ammunition resupply every 3 days. We're getting it every 36 hours and still running low. The problem isn't the total ammunition available, it's getting it from the dump to the tank during combat operations. We can't pull tanks out of action for resupply when they're suppressing enemy positions. The ammunition trucks have to come forward under fire, and we lose trucks faster than we lose tanks. Maintenance supply created the third major logistics burden for armoured operations. The Sherman tank's Continental R975 engine required oil changes every 500 miles of operation. Each oil change consumed 36 gallons of engine oil, plus 5 gallons for transmission and final drives. Combat operations typically required oil changes every 7 to 10 days. A tank battalion needed 2,120 gallons of oil monthly just for routine maintenance. Engine filters required replacement every 1,000 miles. Air filters needed cleaning every 250 miles and replacement every 1,000 miles. The vertical volet spring suspension system required frequent maintenance. Each suspension unit contained compressed coil springs that could break under the stress of cross-country operations. Track replacement became the most demanding maintenance task. Sherman tracks lasted approximately 1,500 miles under ideal road conditions, but deteriorated rapidly during cross-country operations. Combat units in France reported track life of 400 to 600 miles. A complete track set weighed 5,780 pounds and required specialized lifting equipment for installation. Each tank battalion required a minimum of 30 spare track sets in reserve, representing 173,400 pounds of supplies requiring dedicated transport. The 796th Ordnance Battalion, supporting the 4th Armoured Division during the drive across France, maintained detailed records that revealed the true scope of maintenance supply requirements. Between August 1st and October 31st, 1944, the battalion performed the following maintenance operations on Sherman tanks: 127 complete engine replacements, 215 transmission replacements, 89 final drive replacements, 431 track set replacements, 1,267 suspension unit repairs, and 3,421 miscellaneous repairs requiring parts from depot stock. This maintenance tempo demanded enormous supply flows. A single engine replacement required a GMC CKW truck carrying the replacement engine, tools, and lifting equipment. The Continental R975 engine weighed 1,135 pounds installed with accessories. Specialized handling equipment added another 800 pounds. One truck could carry 4 replacement engines plus minimal tools, representing capability to support 4 tank engine replacements before requiring depot resupply. Transmission replacements presented even greater challenges. The Spicer transmission weighed 485 pounds, and replacement required the tank be immobilized for 8 to 12 hours, while mechanics performed the swap. Forward maintenance units maintained stocks of 15 replacement transmissions per battalion, requiring 3 dedicated trucks just for transmission inventory. Captain Thomas Roberts commanded the 16th Armoured Recovery Battalion, which retrieved and repaired damaged Shermans faster than German forces could confirm their destruction. His unit's efficiency reports from October 1944 document industrial-scale maintenance operations. We recovered 127 Sherman tanks this month. Of these, 89 were returned to service within 72 hours, 23 required depot-level repairs and were evacuated to rear areas, and 15 were stripped for parts and declared total losses. The mathematics of tank recovery requires enormous resources. Each recovery vehicle is a modified Sherman tank with crane and winching equipment. We operate 12 recovery vehicles to support 3 tank battalions. Each recovery mission consumes 60 gallons of fuel, requires 4 crew members, and takes an average of 6 hours from alert to delivery of the damaged tank to maintenance facilities. We're essentially running a mobile factory that processes broken tanks into operational ones. The combined supply requirement for a single Sherman tank during sustained combat operations approached staggering totals when all categories were calculated comprehensively. Daily fuel consumption averaged 150 gallons during combat operations, requiring 1 fuel tanker every 48 hours per tank. Ammunition consumption averaged 30 rounds of 75mm plus 2,000 rounds of .30 caliber plus 200 rounds of .50 caliber daily during combat, requiring 1 ammunition truck per 8 tanks every 72 hours. Maintenance supplies including engine oil, transmission fluid, hydraulic fluid, filters, and cleaning supplies required 1 truck per battalion monthly. Track replacements required 1 truck per battalion every 6 weeks. Major component replacements, including engines and transmissions, required 1 truck per battalion weekly during sustained operations. When these requirements were aggregated at battalion level, the logistics burden became overwhelming. A Sherman tank battalion with 53 tanks required the following dedicated truck support during sustained combat operations: 27 fuel tankers operating continuously to maintain 2-day fuel reserves, 14 ammunition trucks operating continuously to maintain 3-day ammunition reserves, 4 maintenance supply trucks operating weekly to maintain 1-month maintenance supplies, 3 track replacement trucks operating monthly, and 2 major component trucks operating weekly. This totaled 50 trucks dedicated exclusively to supporting tank operations, not including trucks required for battalion headquarters, infantry support, medical evacuation, or general supplies. The ratio of support vehicles to combat vehicles approached 1-to-1, meaning that for every tank engaging enemy forces, another vehicle somewhere in the logistics chain was hauling supplies to keep that tank operational. German forces never achieved comparable logistics ratios for their armoured formations, despite possessing superior tactical vehicles and highly trained crews. The Tiger WWII heavy tank, weighing 126,000 pounds and measuring 20 feet, 8 inches long, excluding the gun, represented the pinnacle of German tank design. Powered by the Maybach HL 230P 45 V12 engine, producing 690 horsepower, at 3,000 revolutions per minute, the Tiger combined massive firepower with exceptional armour protection. The 88mm KWK 36L/56 gun could penetrate 112mm of armour at 2,000 yards, making it lethal to every Allied tank at ranges where return fire proved ineffective. Frontal armour measured 100mm on the hull and 100mm on the turret, sloped at angles that increased effective thickness beyond 140mm equivalent. Side armour of 80mm and rear armour of 82mm provided all-around protection superior to any Allied medium tank. These specifications gave the Tiger unmatched battlefield superiority in direct combat, with individual Tigers routinely destroying multiple Allied tanks before being knocked out themselves. Post-war analysis by American intelligence calculated average kill ratios of 5.4 Allied tanks destroyed per Tiger loss during 1943, declining to 3.8 during 1944-1944 as Allied air superiority and improved tactics reduced German advantages. Yet these tactical advantages proved strategically worthless because German logistics could not sustain Tiger operations. The Maybach engine consumed fuel at catastrophic rates that German supply services could not match. Tests conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland using captured Tiger 712 documented fuel consumption of approximately 1.2 gallons per mile on roads under ideal conditions with constant speed and optimal gear selection. Cross-country operations, requiring frequent gear changes and higher engine loads, increased consumption to 4.1 gallons per mile over rough terrain courses designed to simulate combat conditions. Combat simulations incorporating frequent acceleration and deceleration for tactical positioning, turret traverse operations consuming auxiliary power, extended idling periods simulating observation and fire control, and intensive radio usage maintaining communications produced fuel consumption of 6.1 gallons per mile. Under these intensive combat conditions, representative of actual battlefield employment, the Tiger's operational range fell to approximately 23 miles before fuel exhaustion immobilized the vehicle. A Tiger battalion conducting mobile operations consumed its entire fuel allocation within 4 to 6 hours of sustained combat, after which the unit sat immobilized awaiting tanker trucks that often never arrived. A Tiger in active combat consumed 300 gallons daily, double the Sherman's fuel requirement and exceeding German logistics capacity to deliver. German logistics, already strained by Allied air interdiction and limited truck production, could not provide adequate fuel for Tiger operations. Heavy SS Panzer Battalion, 101's War Diary from Normandy, in summer 1944, documented recurring fuel shortages that immobilized tactically superior tanks. The July 8th entry reported 16 Sherman tanks and 3 Cromwell tanks destroyed for the loss of 1 Tiger to mechanical failure. But fuel supplies were exhausted after 4 hours of combat, preventing pursuit of retreating Allied forces. The mathematics of supporting a Tiger battalion revealed German logistics inadequacy. Each Tiger required 300 gallons daily during combat operations. A Tiger battalion, with 20 tanks, required 6,000 gallons daily, just for the Tigers themselves, not including support vehicles. German fuel tankers, typically modified civilian trucks, carried approximately 500 gallons. A Tiger battalion required 12 fuel tanker trips daily to maintain operations, assuming no losses to Allied air attack. German tanker truck production totaled approximately 5,000 units for all purposes during the entire war. American production exceeded 100,000 fuel tankers during the same period. The disparity in logistics capacity fundamentally determined operational possibilities. American armored divisions could conduct sustained operations hundreds of miles from supply bases because adequate trucks existed to maintain supply lines. German armored divisions rarely operated more than 40 kilometers from established supply points because fuel shortages immobilized units that ventured beyond tanker range. Ammunition supply for Tiger battalions created comparable difficulties. The 88mm KWK 36L/56 gun fired ammunition weighing 45 pounds per complete round. Standard load was 92 rounds. Combat operations consumed approximately 20 rounds daily per tank. German ammunition trucks, typically requisitioned civilian vehicles, carried mixed loads averaging 320 rounds of 88mm ammunition. A Tiger battalion required 1 ammunition truck daily per 2 tanks to maintain combat stocks. This assumed perfect logistics, no losses to air attack, no mechanical failures, and no road damage. Reality never approached these ideal conditions. The MG-34 machine gun mounted in Tiger tanks fired 7.92mm ammunition from 50 round belts. Each Tiger carried 5,100 rounds. German logistics struggled to maintain adequate machine gun ammunition supply as small arms ammunition production competed with artillery shell production for limited copper and steel supplies. Maintenance supply for Tigers exceeded German production capacity for spare parts. The Maybach HL230 engine required replacement every 1,000 kilometers under combat conditions, far short of the Continental AR 975's 5,000 kilometer service life. Tiger transmission failures occurred every 300 kilometers on average. Overlapping road wheel suspension, while providing excellent ride quality, required complete disassembly to replace inner wheels, a maintenance task requiring 48 hours and specialized equipment. German tank maintenance units lacked adequate spare parts, tools, or trained personnel to maintain Tiger operational readiness. By late 1944, captured German maintenance records showed Tiger operational readiness rates below 30%, meaning that of every 100 Tigers on unit strength reports, fewer than 30 could actually move and fight. Sherman operational readiness consistently exceeded 85% throughout the European campaign. At division level, the logistics burden of armoured warfare reached industrial scales that challenged even American abundance. The 4th Armoured Division, commanded by Major General John Wood, operated approximately 180 Sherman tanks across 3 tank battalions, plus 54 Stuart light tanks in the reconnaissance battalion. Supporting these tanks required 684 trucks assigned to division logistics units, not counting trucks assigned to combat battalions for immediate tactical support. The division consumed approximately 85,000 gallons of fuel daily during sustained operations. This required 114 tanker trucks operating continuously on a 48-hour resupply cycle. Ammunition consumption reached 5,400 rounds of 75mm, 360,000 rounds of .30 caliber, and 36,000 rounds of .50 caliber daily during intense combat. This required 68 ammunition trucks operating on a 72-hour resupply cycle. Maintenance supplies required 24 trucks operating continuously. Food for the division's 10,937 personnel required 32 trucks operating daily. Medical supplies required 8 trucks. Miscellaneous supplies, including lubricants, batteries, radio parts, and general equipment, required 16 trucks operating weekly. Colonel Nixon, Assistant Division Commander for the 4th Armoured, recorded in his personal diary on September 23, 1944, the overwhelming scope of division logistics. "We are not fighting a war. We are operating a mobile city of 11,000 people that consumes resources like a small American town, except this town moves 40 miles daily and has people actively trying to destroy it. Our logistics officers work harder than combat commanders because their failures have immediate battlefield consequences. If fuel doesn't arrive, tanks don't move. If ammunition doesn't arrive, guns don't fire. The Germans can have the best tanks in the world, but if they can't fuel them or arm them, it doesn't matter. We win through supply abundance, not tactical brilliance." The contrast between American and German division-level logistics proved decisive across every theatre of operations. The 2nd Panzer Division, a veteran German formation with comparable strength to American armoured divisions, operated during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 with approximately 120 tanks and assault guns. German logistics allocated fuel for only 150 kilometers of movement during the entire offensive, assuming capture of American fuel dumps would provide additional supplies. The plan failed immediately when American forces held or destroyed threatened fuel dumps. By December 23, 1944, the 2nd Panzer Division had consumed its fuel allocation and sat immobilized near Celles, Belgium, where it was systematically destroyed by Allied forces. The division's war diary entry for December 24th recorded the catastrophe. All fuel exhausted, vehicles immobilized, American fighter bombers attacking continuously, no resupply possible, permission requested to abandon vehicles and withdraw on foot. This represented the ultimate failure of logistics, a tactically capable armoured division rendered helpless not by enemy tanks or superior tactics, but by empty fuel tanks. German operational planning consistently underestimated logistics requirements while overestimating logistics capacity. During planning for the Ardennes offensive in late 1944, German staff officers calculated fuel requirements based on optimal conditions, paved roads, minimal combat, and perfect weather. Actual fuel consumption during the offensive exceeded planning estimates by 340%. German logistics, already strained beyond capacity, collapsed completely. Allied forces monitoring German radio traffic through ultra-decryption intercepted desperate German requests for fuel. Major Joachim Peiper, commanding Kampfgruppe Peiper, radioed on December 19th that his entire combat group, including Tiger IIs from the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, sat immobilized with empty fuel tanks only 60 kilometers from the offensive start line. American forces, reading these intercepts in real time, understood that German logistics had failed before German tactics could succeed. The organizational structure of American logistics created decisive advantages that German forces could not replicate. The United States Army established the services of supply, later redesignated the communications zone as a separate command structure parallel to tactical combat forces. In the European theater of operations, the communications zone employed 368,000 personnel, approximately 25% of total American strength, exclusively for logistics functions. These personnel operated port facilities, maintained supply dumps, drove trucks, repaired vehicles, processed paperwork, and managed the flow of materials from American factories to European battlefields. German logistics remained subordinated to tactical commands without comparable dedicated infrastructure. German divisions and corps handled their own logistics, using personnel and vehicles diverted from combat functions. This organizational decision meant that German combat units fought at reduced strength because soldiers and vehicles were allocated to logistics tasks. The services of supply operated with industrial efficiency that German military tradition considered inappropriate for armed forces. Colonel John Levet, commanding a supply depot near Verdun in September 1944, managed operations that would have shocked German logistics officers trained in military hierarchy and careful planning. We process 5,000 tons of supplies daily through this depot. My staff includes warehouse supervisors from Sears Roebuck, trucking dispatchers from Allied Van Lines, and inventory managers from General Motors. They're civilians in uniform, but they know logistics better than any military academy graduate. We use IBM punch card systems to track inventory. We operate 24-hour shifts. We treat this like a business because it is a business, the business of moving materials faster than the enemy can destroy them. American logistics planners anticipated supply requirements months in advance and positioned supplies accordingly. During planning for the Normandy invasion, logistics officers calculated fuel requirements for the first 90 days of operations based on expected advance rates, terrain types, and weather conditions. These calculations, completed in early 1944, accurately predicted actual consumption through September 1944 within 8% margin of error. Fuel dumps were established along projected advance routes before American forces liberated those areas. Ammunition stocks were positioned based on expected German defensive positions identified through aerial reconnaissance and intelligence analysis. This planning depth required enormous staff work, comprehensive data collection, and willingness to allocate resources to logistics rather than combat units. German planning, focused primarily on tactical operations, consistently underestimated logistics requirements and failed to position adequate supplies. The Red Ball Express, established in August 1944 to supply advancing American forces after the breakout from Normandy, represented American logistics capacity at maximum effort. The operation deployed 5,958 trucks, operated by 23,000 drivers, approximately 75% African American soldiers serving in a still segregated army. These trucks operated 24 hours daily on dedicated one-way highways from port facilities at Cherbourg to forward supply dumps near the front lines, a distance approaching 400 miles. The operation delivered 12,500 tons of supplies daily for 82 days, totaling 412,000 tons. German intelligence officers, observing the Red Ball Express from concealed positions, reported vehicle columns extending 20 kilometers with 30-second spacing between trucks, visible day and night with headlights blazing. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, reported to Army Group B headquarters that the Americans operate a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals day and night without pause. They don't hide, don't disperse, don't follow any rules we understand. It's not military science, its mass production applied to warfare. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of fuel daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. This represented logistics consuming logistics, a concept German efficiency could not comprehend. Yet American fuel production exceeded 2 billion gallons monthly, making the Red Ball Express's fuel consumption an acceptable overhead cost for maintaining offensive momentum. German logistics officers, accustomed to carefully husbanding scarce resources, found American logistics philosophy incomprehensible. Americans seemed to waste deliberately, burning fuel to deliver fuel, destroying trucks through intensive use rather than maintaining them carefully, and abandoning damaged equipment rather than repairing it. This apparent waste reflected abundance so overwhelming that efficiency became secondary to speed. The mathematical relationship between tanks and trucks determined operational possibilities throughout the European campaign. American forces maintained approximately 5 trucks per tank across the theatre, counting all logistics vehicles from port operations through division supply units. German forces, with limited truck production and massive losses to Allied air attack, operated approximately 2 trucks per tank by late 1944, and this ratio declined continuously as truck losses exceeded replacements. The consequences appeared in operational tempo and strategic reach. American armored divisions routinely conducted operations 200 miles from established supply bases because adequate trucks existed to maintain supply lines across that distance. German armored divisions rarely ventured beyond 40 miles from established supply infrastructure because fuel shortages immobilized units that exceeded tanker range. The Lorraine campaign in autumn 1944 illustrated these mathematical relationships with brutal clarity. The Third Army, commanded by General George Patton, operated 6 armored divisions and 15 infantry divisions across a front extending 100 miles in eastern France. Supply lines extended approximately 400 miles from channel ports through Paris to the front lines. The army consumed 850,000 gallons of fuel daily, requiring 1,134 tanker trucks operating continuously on 48-hour resupply cycles. Ammunition consumption reached 8,000 tons daily, requiring 1,600 trucks operating on 72-hour cycles. Third Army's organic truck strength totaled 12,784 vehicles, supplemented by 8,500 trucks from the communication zone. Total truck strength exceeded 21,000 vehicles, supporting 300,000 combat personnel, a ratio exceeding 1 truck per 15 soldiers. German forces opposing Third Army, Army Group G, commanded by General Hermann Balck, operated approximately 4,800 trucks supporting 200,000 personnel, a ratio of 1 truck per 42 soldiers. German logistics could not concentrate supplies for sustained operations, while American logistics maintained continuous offensive pressure across the entire front simultaneously. Patton recorded in his diary on November 8, 1944, his growing appreciation for logistics superiority. "I have always believed that wars are won by killing the enemy. I was wrong. Wars are won by supplying the force that kills the enemy. My tanks fire more shells in one day than German divisions fire in a week, not because my gunners are braver, but because my trucks deliver more ammunition. My divisions advance while German divisions sit immobile, not because my soldiers march faster, but because my fuel tankers keep rolling. The Germans cannot win this war because they cannot supply their armies adequately. They are defeated by their own logistics inadequacy as surely as by our tactical action." The strategic impact of logistics mathematics extended beyond individual campaigns to determine the war's outcome. Germany produced approximately 1,347 Tiger-the-Fond heavy tanks, each requiring enormous logistics support that German infrastructure could not provide. These tanks achieved remarkable tactical success, with individual Tigers often accounting for 10 or more Allied tank kills before being destroyed or abandoned. Yet the Tiger ultimately failed strategically because inadequate logistics limited operational deployment. At any given time during 1944, fewer than 30% of produced Tigers were operationally available. The remainder sat immobilized, awaiting fuel, ammunition, spare parts, or major repairs. The United States produced 49,234 Sherman tanks during the war, accepting mediocre tactical performance in exchange for logistical sustainability. Sherman operational availability consistently exceeded 85% because adequate spare parts, maintenance facilities, and fuel supplies existed throughout the logistics chain. The production time comparison revealed fundamental differences in strategic thinking. Germany required 300,000 to 450,000 man-hours to produce one Tiger, incorporating hand-fitted components, complex systems, and expensive materials. The United States required 17,000 to 48,000 man-hours to produce one Sherman using assembly line methods, interchangeable parts, and standardized components. One Tiger's production time equaled 6 to 26 Shermans. Germany chose quality over quantity, creating a weapon it could not sustain logistically. America chose quantity over quality, creating a weapon sustainable through any supply disruption. Cost analysis showed comparable disparities. Tigers cost 250,000 to 300,000 Reichsmarks in 1945 values. Shermans cost $44,556 to $64,455 in August 1945 catalogue prices. Direct comparison remained difficult due to wartime currency manipulations, but the relative allocation of national resources proved decisive. Germany allocated enormous industrial capacity to produce small numbers of complex weapons. America allocated comparable capacity to produce massive numbers of simpler weapons, then allocated additional capacity to produce the logistics infrastructure to sustain those weapons. Fuel consumption ratios determined operational possibilities regardless of tactical capability. Tigers consumed 2.75 gallons per mile on roads. Shermans consumed 0.5 gallons per mile on roads. One Tiger's fuel consumption equaled 5.5 Shermans. German fuel production from synthetic plants and Romanian fields totaled approximately 250,000 barrels of aviation gasoline and 100,000 barrels of motor fuel monthly by mid-1944. This production supported the Luftwaffe, all ground forces, and civilian economies simultaneously. American petroleum production exceeded 4.7 million barrels daily, over 140 million barrels monthly, supporting global operations across multiple theaters with enough surplus to supply Allied forces through Lend-Lease. The disparity was not marginal. It represented different industrial orders of magnitude. Maintenance requirements created final proof of logistics determining strategy. Tigers required 10 hours of maintenance for every hour of operation. Shermans required 1 hour of maintenance for every 10 hours of operation. One Tiger's maintenance burden equaled 100 Shermans. German maintenance units lacked adequate spare parts, tools, or trained personnel to maintain Tiger readiness. By late 1944, captured German records showed Tiger operational readiness below 30%. American maintenance units, supported by enormous spare parts inventories, mobile maintenance facilities, and trained personnel, maintained Sherman readiness above 85% throughout the campaign. The tactical superiority of the Tiger became irrelevant when German logistics could not keep Tigers operational. The tactical adequacy of the Sherman proved decisive because American logistics maintained continuous operational availability. The hidden cost of armored warfare extended beyond vehicles and supplies to human capital. Tiger crews required 19 man-months minimum training to achieve combat proficiency. Sherman crews required 5 man-months standard training. One Tiger crew's training time equaled 4 Sherman crews. Germany allocated scarce training resources to produce highly skilled tankers who often died with their irreplaceable tanks. America allocated training resources to produce adequately skilled tankers who could be rapidly replaced when casualties occurred. This reflected fundamentally different strategic philosophies. Germany valued individual excellence, creating an elite force that could not be sustained. America valued systemic adequacy, creating a force that could absorb losses and maintain combat power. By April 1945, as American forces crossed the Rhine and drove into Germany, the mathematics of logistics had determined the war's outcome irreversibly. German forces abandoned hundreds of Tiger and Panther tanks, not from battle damage, but from fuel exhaustion and lack of spare parts. The 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armoured Division, reported on April 18th that strength totaled 53 Shermans with 51 operational and 2 awaiting repair completion by nightfall. Replacement tanks sat available in depots. 15 crew replacements were available, including 3 complete crews, plus individual specialists. Meanwhile, Oberst Wilhelm Müller, commanding an improvised German battle group defending Nuremberg, reported final humiliation. My command consists of 3 Tigers with 1 operational, 8 Shermans captured and repaired, 12 assault guns, and various wheeled vehicles. The American tanks are easier to maintain than our own. We are fighting American tanks with American tanks. The war ended not with dramatic tank battles, but with American columns driving past abandoned German armour. Tigers sat beside roads, out of fuel, out of ammunition, out of spare parts. Their crews, the best trained tank soldiers in history, walked home in defeat. Sherman columns rolled through Germany, each lost tank immediately replaced from the endless stream flowing from Atlantic ports. Their crews, adequately trained and utterly confident in their supply chain, barely paused to acknowledge the abandoned German giants. General Dwight Eisenhower, touring defeated Germany, observed the ultimate truth. We did not defeat German tanks. We defeated German production. Every Tiger was a tactical victory that cost them strategic capability. Every Sherman we lost was replaced before they finished counting their kills. The legacy of armoured warfare logistics transformed post-war military doctrine permanently. The United States Army established logistics as co-equal with combat operations in strategic planning. The principle became doctrine. No weapon system would be fielded without adequate logistics infrastructure to sustain it in extended operations. The Korean War in 1950 validated these lessons when American forces initially struggled with supply lines extending from Japanese ports. The solution involved applying World War II logistics principles at increased scale, establishing continuous motor transport operations, massive supply dumps, and redundant supply routes. The Vietnam War demonstrated the same principles in hostile terrain. American forces maintained operations deep in jungle terrain because helicopters and trucks delivered supplies continuously despite enemy interdiction attempts. Modern American military doctrine continues emphasizing logistics sustainability. The M1 Abrams tank, introduced in 1980 and still operational in 2025, incorporates fuel efficiency as a critical design parameter despite weighing 70 tons. The tank carries over 500 gallons of fuel and achieves approximately 0.6 miles per gallon, enabling operational range exceeding 300 miles on roads. Designers remembered that mobility depends fundamentally on fuel efficiency, and fuel efficiency demands disciplined engineering choices, balancing firepower, protection, and mobility with sustainable logistics. The mathematical relationship established during World War II remains immutable. 1 tank requires 5 trucks. This ratio represents not just vehicle numbers, but the entire logistics infrastructure required to sustain armoured warfare. The fuel tankers delivering gasoline, the ammunition trucks hauling shells, the maintenance vehicles carrying spare parts, the recovery vehicles retrieving damaged tanks, and the command vehicles coordinating operations all multiply to create logistics requirements that equal or exceed the combat power they support. German forces learned this lesson through thousands of abandoned tigers from North Africa to Normandy to the Ardennes to Berlin. American forces learned it through systematic planning, enormous production, and willingness to allocate resources to logistics rather than concentrating exclusively on combat capability. The forgotten heroes of armored warfare were not the tank commanders who achieved tactical victory, but the truck drivers who made those victories possible. The 23,000 drivers of the Red Ball Express, predominantly African American soldiers serving in a segregated army discriminated against in their own country, delivered 412,000 tons of supplies across 82 days of continuous operations that proved as decisive as any tank battle. Their contribution determined whether campaigns succeeded or failed. These men drove 20 hours daily through exhaustion that killed judgment, through mechanical failures that killed schedules, through weather that stopped armor, and sometimes through enemy action that killed drivers. Private First Class Willie F. Davis of the 3916 Quartermaster Truck Company recorded in his diary the brutal reality of Red Ball driving. August 30th, 1944. Third straight day running without sleep except for 10-minute naps at fuel stops. Drove 380 miles yesterday, 340 today. The truck feels like it's driving itself and I'm just along for the ride. Nearly went off the road twice from exhaustion. The white officers say we're winning the war with these trucks. Right now, I'm too tired to care. Just want to reach the depot, unload, and sleep for 10 minutes before driving back. The maintenance crews who worked through freezing nights repairing transmissions in field maintenance areas enabled tanks to continue fighting when doctrine said they should be evacuated to rear depots. These mechanics, often working by flashlight and lantern to maintain blackout discipline, performed repairs German military science declared impossible under field conditions. Corporal James Henderson of the 796th Ordnance Battalion described a typical night's work in November 1944. We received 4 Shermans with transmission failures at 1800 hours. Standard procedure says send them to depot. But the battalion needed them operational by dawn for the morning attack. We worked all night in freezing rain using portable hoists and hand tools. Had all 4 transmissions replaced by 0530. The tanks rolled out with the attack at 0630. Nobody wrote medals for that, but it probably saved lives by ensuring the attack had adequate armor support. The fuel tanker drivers who ran convoys under artillery fire ensured tanks never sat immobilized waiting for gasoline. These drivers, the lowest-ranked personnel in the logistics chain, made life or death decisions hourly that officers in rear areas never confronted. Technical Sergeant Marcus Washington commanded a fuel convoy to Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. His after-action report, filed on December 28th, documented the reality of logistics under fire, departed forward fuel dump 0600 with 8 tankers carrying 6,000 gallons. German artillery interdicted the road at 0730. Lost 1 truck, driver killed, 750 gallons lost. Bypassed through farm fields. Reached battalion at 10:45. Delivered fuel under small arms fire. Lost second truck to mine during withdrawal. 2 crew wounded. Delivered 4,500 of 6,000 gallons allocated. Battalion continued operations. That's what we do. Nobody remembers it, but wars aren't won without it. The ammunition handlers who loaded trucks in rear depots worked industrial jobs under military discipline, performing back-breaking labor that consumed muscle and spirit equally. Private Robert Morrison, assigned to the 4th Ammunition Depot in Normandy, kept a journal describing work that broke men faster than combat broke soldiers. June 28, 1944. Loaded 47 trucks today. Each load requires moving 7,200 pounds of 75mm shells by hand. That's 338,400 pounds I personally lifted today. My back screams, my hands bleed through gloves. Tomorrow I'll do it again. The shells I loaded today kill Germans. The lieutenant says maybe save American lives. I hope so, because this labor is killing me slowly. These soldiers rarely received recognition, never appeared in newspaper photographs of dramatic tank battles, and remain largely forgotten in popular histories glorifying combat. Yet their contribution determined whether tanks fought or sat immobilized, whether offensives continued or stalled, whether campaigns succeeded or failed. The mathematics of their labor revealed warfare's true cost. For every hour a Sherman tank fought, 50 hours of labor by logistics personnel supported that combat. Every 75mm shell fired represented 3 man-hours of work from factory production through depot storage to forward delivery. Every gallon of fuel consumed required 2 man-hours of labor from refinery to tank. The seemingly effortless advance of American armored divisions across France rested on millions of man-hours by personnel whose names appear in no histories, whose sacrifices receive no monuments, and whose contributions remain deliberately forgotten in narratives celebrating battlefield heroics. Sergeant John Irwin, who had 3 Shermans shot from under him during the European campaign, explained the American advantage succinctly in a post-war interview. "We were taught that tanks were expendable, crews were not. Bail out fast, walk back, get another tank. The Germans fought like their tigers were made of gold because to them they were. They died trying to save machines. We lived by abandoning them." This philosophy reflected logistics abundance, enabling tactical flexibility. American tank crews could afford to abandon damaged vehicles because replacement tanks arrived continuously. German tank crews fought to save irreplaceable vehicles because replacements would never come. The final accounting of logistics determined victory through industrial mathematics that no tactical brilliance could overcome. Tiger production totaled 1,347 vehicles, requiring enormous resources per unit. Sherman production totaled 49,234 vehicles, using efficient mass production. Tiger fuel consumption averaged 2.75 gallons per mile. Sherman fuel consumption averaged 0.5 gallons per mile. Tiger maintenance required 10 hours per operational hour. Sherman maintenance required 1 hour per 10 operational hours. Tiger operational availability reached 30%. Sherman operational availability exceeded 85%. Tiger crew training required 19 man-months. Sherman crew training required 5 man-months. These ratios, multiplied across thousands of vehicles and millions of man-hours, determined the war's outcome as surely as any battle. Germany built superior tanks that it could not sustain logistically. America built adequate tanks that it could sustain indefinitely. In mechanized warfare, the side that can sustain operations across distance and time wins. The Tiger forgot that fundamental rule. The Sherman remembered it. History rendered its verdict through abandoned Tigers, littering European roads, and Sherman columns rolling through Berlin. The hidden cost of armoured warfare was never hidden at all. It was documented in logistics reports, calculated in supply requisitions, and demonstrated in every operational plan. 1 tank requires 5 trucks. This simple ratio contains the entire complexity of modern mechanized warfare, and the reason that logistics determine strategy more decisively than tactics. American victory in World War II resulted not from superior tanks or braver soldiers, but from superior logistics that kept adequate tanks supplied continuously, while enemy tanks, superior tactically, sat immobilized awaiting fuel, ammunition, and spare parts that never arrived. The trucks won the war as surely as the tanks, perhaps more surely, because without the trucks, the tanks would never have moved at all.